Part 22. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi-san. Chapter 214. There are at least 200 lead chairs here. Victoria's face was expressionless, but her eyes were full of gloom. Each one is stained with blood, and judging from the newness and oldness of the blood stains, judging from the extent, this place has been used for a long time. The experiment mentioned by Arezaka Yui should be to use radiation and the biotechnology of the Alpha civilization to transform people into monsters like her. Kaylan murmured, and one could tell just from the twisted corpses. How terrible the pain did these people who were used as experimental materials endure. Liao Zilang is also one of them. I checked the number of deaths and cancellations in the East 9th District in the past 6 months, and found that there were only 57 people, and there were less than 200 registered missing persons. Victoria said slowly. That is to say. Kaylan felt a chill penetrate his spine. In addition to the remains secretly disposed of by the Arezaka Consortium, this experiment should have a large number of finished products or semi-finished products. Victoria nodded to him. If you change your mind now, go back and blockade if there is a line. It's still too late. It's too late, Kaylan said, taking off a grenade hanging on his waist. 2 rickety radiation monsters had blocked the exit of the factory. They crawled on all fours, their curved spines high-arched, the shoulders, back, chest and abdomen are covered with large hard cuticles, but the skin on the cheeks has almost completely rotted and fallen off, revealing the white skeleton inside, with 2 swollen eyeballs bulging outwards, as if they will fall out at any time. It's like the eyes are falling out of their sockets. The bodies of these 2 monsters are close to the ground. Their vocal cords have completely lost their original functions. They can only roar ho-ho continuously, and their sharp bone claws rub against the ground, which is heartbreaking. The sound of scraping echoed through the factory. There are also above the head, on the metal beam, 3, no, 4, Victoria said, holding the nano alloy steel claw in one hand and holding the pistol tightly in the other, forming a back-to-back position with Kaylan. If these monsters have the fighting power of Yui Arezaka? Probably not. Arezaka Yui said personally that she is the final result of this experiment, and these things in front of you are only semi-finished products at best. I just don't know how strong the semi-finished products are, Kaylan said, using my thumb gently flipped the safety located above the trigger. These monsters didn't leave Kaylan and Victoria more time. After a brief confrontation, they rushed forward one after another. I'll deal with the 2 at the door, and I'll leave the top to you, Kaylan said quickly. His finger had already pulled the trigger. Dozens of electromagnetic bombs dragged a blue stream of light towards those who had already rushed forward. The 2 radiation monsters. Victoria, on the other hand, jumped into the air more than 3 meters above the ground. Her long and powerful mechanical legs swept in a circle, kicking all 4 monsters that jumped off the beam away. You are right. In terms of strength and speed, these monsters are indeed much worse than Arezaka Yui. When Victoria fell back to the ground, Kaylan had already beaten the 2 radiation monsters into sieves. The blood of these monsters is dark green, with a pungent smell similar to rotten eggs. Moreover, when the pus and blood flow out of the monster's body, the radiation concentration in the surrounding environment suddenly rises. A lot. These mutated radiation monsters are actually patients with severe radiation sickness. They are themselves a mobile radiation source. Even if they die, their bones will continuously release radiation. This process can last for dozens or even hundreds of years. Unless their corpses are buried in heavy coffins made of lead-zinc alloy and a thick layer of concrete is poured outside, the radiation can be completely isolated. But the problem lies in the quantity. Just as Kaylan beat the 2 radiation monsters to death, more monsters emerged from every corner of the factory. These radiation monsters are very similar to the ghouls of the old era, but compared with the ghouls, they also have some characteristics of alpha indigenous creatures, and these characteristics give them more powerful combat power. Although the zombies mutated by radiation look very scary in appearance, most of them are not even as strong as a strong adult man. A military police team equipped with old aerolite weapons can easily clear out an abandoned town with more than 100 ghouls. The only thing they need to pay attention to is the strong radiation carried by the ghouls. As for the ghouls, in itself, it is difficult to pose a threat to humans holding modern weapons. But these radiation monsters are different. They are stronger and faster. They have sharp claws and solid carapace, and more importantly, they are not afraid of death. In their consciousness, there is only the desire to kill. Except for individuals with severe brain damage, most ghouls retain the memories of their time as humans. Only when they have no choice but to do so, they will actively attack humans, and when they encounter clean-up troops, the only thing they can do is hide and run away. When the Arasaka Consortium prepared these radiation monsters, except for special individuals like Yui Arasaka, they must have erased the memories of these people's lives. If you have to find a similar example, those horror movies and apocalyptic novels, the zombie in it is closer. Reload, cover me. Kaylan quickly emptied a magazine. 20 to 100 meters directly in front of him, a dozen corpses of radioactive monsters had fallen, but from these the radiation released from the corpse has caused the radiation concentration in the factory to reach above the dangerous threshold. Every time Kaylan took a breath, he suspected that what he was inhaling into his lungs was not air, but a handful of finely broken steel needles. There was a constant tingling sensation in his respiratory tract, and the scene in front of him began to become a little blurry. "We can't drag it out here any longer," Victoria said sternly, although Kaylan didn't know whether she meant that there was little time left for the mission or that this place was too dangerous for her. In short, no matter what she meant, they really couldn't. "Don't stay in this factory anymore. Get ready to break out." Victoria shot the radiation monster closest to her in the head, turned around and stood in the same direction as Kaylan. "I'll rush in front to clear the way, you follow closely behind. If your steps are slow, I will not turn around to save you." Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi-san. Chapter 216. Victoria and Kaylan fought their way out of the factory one after another, but the radiation monsters chased them all the way out and had no intention of letting them go. "I've run out of bullets." Kaylan threw away the gun in his hand, pulled out a hunting knife, and held it upside down in the palm of his hand. "I still have 5 rounds," Victoria said, shooting again to kill a radiation monster that rushed forward. 4 rounds. As he spoke, Kaylan felt as if something sticky was flowing out of his nostrils. He raised his hand to wipe it, and immediately smeared the sticky nosebleeds on the back of his hand. The radiation emitted from these monsters has caused serious damage to his body. Not only him, but even Victoria, who was not very afraid of radiation. The movements of the prosthetic body were somewhat deformed at this time. Radiation not only affects living organisms, but also corrodes the precise circuits in high-tech equipment. "We have to retreat to the entrance of the park first. There are guns and protective clothing in the security room, and the corpses of the rebels also have weapons," Kaylan shouted to Victoria as he ran away. I know, hiss. Due to radiation erosion, a large amount of electrical noise began to emit from Victoria's sound-producing device, but at least it was not completely scrapped. "The radiation generated by the gathering of these monsters is too strong," Kaylan said while covering his nostrils with his hands. The blood seeping from under the nasal mucosa was constantly overflowing and leaking from the gaps between his fingers. It dripped onto the clothes. His legs were as if they were filled with lead. Every time he moved, he had to use all his strength, and his internal organs were twitching involuntarily, making him unable to straighten up in pain. The Geiger counter in his pocket was beeping wildly, and the single-segment warning sounds were almost continuous. Kaylan knew that the number displayed on the screen at this time must be a very scary number. If he could make it back alive this time, he would probably have to spend another 10 days and a half in the medical cabin. "These radioactive monsters," Hiss, radioactive ores have been implanted in their bodies. Hiss, I saw it in a body. Hiss, with the chest cavity opened. Victoria, he said intermittently. No wonder the radiation is so strong. The purpose of the Arezaka Consortium should be to continue to promote further mutation of these monsters, but for us, every monster is almost a dirty bomb. These beasts, cough cough. As Kaylan spoke, he choked out another mouthful of blood. There were still some fragments of respiratory mucosa floating in this mouthful of blood. We're here. Kaylan stumbled into the security room first, and Victoria, who was in charge of the rear guard, smashed the empty gun at the chasing monster, then pushed hard and closed the heavy explosion-proof door. The structure of the security room is quite solid, at least those monsters will not be able to break into it for a while. Kaylan, who was relieved, sat down on the ground, took out the water bottle from his backpack, and drank heavily. It's been so long since Major Ashkani fired the signal bomb, and the reinforcements from outside haven't come in yet. They must have been blocked by the heretical section. Kaylan put the empty kettle aside and wiped the corners of his mouth. Hiss, don't, hiss, hope, hiss, reinforcements, Victoria said as she used her iron fist to break open the safe embedded in the wall and threw the medical kit and protective clothing in the cabinet to he grabbed Kaylan and then took off a riot controller's shotgun hanging next to him. That's right, but what I mean is that there may be more than one monster like you. Arezaka. Kaylan stretched out his hand to pull the medical box over, and pried open the lid of the box with a dagger. This kind of monster, without heavy weapons, the garrison is really difficult to deal with. Their reconnaissance team is considered a top-notch team, with senior agents from the Security Bureau and elite non-commissioned officers from the garrison, plus Victoria, a character with extraordinary combat power. But even so, they were almost wiped out at the hands of Yui Arezaka. Here, to be precise, if Kaylan hadn't launched such a weird cross-dimensional strike with the help of Holy Word, they would have been wiped out. This is not, something we need to be concerned about. Victoria also put on a protective suit. Even the cybernetic body cannot operate for a long time in the strong radiation environment just now, unless it can replace all the electronic chips in the prosthetic body with the crystal circuit structure used by Alpha civilization. However, now that I think about it, there is something in Arezaka Yui's words that doesn't make sense. She lied. Kaylan combined zyuridine, diuretics, potassium chloride solution and normal saline in the ratio of 1:1:1:9. Mix it in a certain proportion and then push it into the body through intravenous injection. Victoria turned her head and looked at Kaylan with confusion. She said, a certain great ritual of the heretic sect has been completed, and we have lost. But if we have lost, if that ritual has been completed, then why does the heretic sect devote so much power to stop it? Where are the troops entering East 9th District? What does the great ceremony refer to? She didn't say, but I think it must be inseparable from their great god. Oh, by the way, this Baichi also mentioned the sacred object given by the god. I think it was man's tine. The thing this guy brought out from Leviathan and hid in his body, Kaylan said, his face suddenly changed slightly. Can you turn your head? What's wrong? The diuretic you just injected has taken effect. Do you plan to watch me pee? Kaylan held the empty water bottle with one hand and put the other hand on the zipper of his pants. In fact, Kaylan still had half a sentence left to say, although you don't look like a woman at all, at least your identity data should be female. Victoria didn't speak, but turned her head back expressionlessly. Kaylan quickly opened the zipper, pointed the little brother at the mouth of the kettle, and started to waterproof it. The principles of oral and injectable cyuridine are basically the same, except that the latter works faster. The active ingredients in the drug will combine with radioactive particles in the human body to form a precipitate, and then in the diuretic, excreted from the body through urine. Although cyuridine cannot clean up all the radiation in the body and has no effect on the damage caused by radiation, it is still the highest priority rescue method for people who have just suffered from severe radiation. The 1.5-liter kettle was quickly filled. Kaylan tightened the cap and threw the kettle out of the window. These urines have now become dangerous radioactive sources. Generally speaking, in radiation sickness, according to the standard operating procedures of treatment, these effluents must be stored in sealed lead containers to prevent secondary contamination. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 217. But at this moment, a loud noise suddenly came from outside the explosion-proof door of the security room. Boom. The entire security room shook violently, and Kaylan, who was unzipping his pants, almost caught some of his hair. What's going on? He quickly tied up his belt, put on protective clothing, and grabbed another riot controller shotgun in the cabinet. There's something, banging on the door, Victoria said. She had taken out all the ammunition boxes from the safe and stacked them on the table. Most of these ammunition were non-lethal bean bags. There are only 2 boxes of bullets and lead bullets, and apart from shotguns, the only other weapons left are taser guns and anesthesia needles. These things are quite effective in dealing with humans, but in the face of radiation monsters, they are useless. It's less than half effective. Kaylan grabbed a few lead bullets and pushed them into the barrel of the gun. Then he quickly moved to the window and looked out through the iron fence and metal mesh. He saw a tall figure standing in front of the door of the security room. Holding a heavy naginata shaped like a guan sword in his hand, he hacked at the explosion-proof door of the security room. It's the guy named Zansi from the 6 Samurai clan. Kaylan had already read the information Sophia passed on to him on the way to the East 9 district. Zansi is the stronger one among the 6 Samurai clan. One of the 3 people possesses the strength of 8th level biochemical transformation. This is just a cut at this time. All the cyborg prosthetics on his body have been dismantled, replaced by a large number of mutated tissues. Even the long handle of the heavy naginata was also wrapped with squirming rotten flesh. Logically speaking, the biological parts of biochemically modified people are not too afraid of radiation. Their tissue cells have been strengthened many times and are difficult to be killed by radiation. The artificially adjusted genetic sequence is extremely stable, especially for high-level biochemically modified people like the 6 warriors. Even if they are thrown next to a melted reactor core, they will not mutate at all within a year and a half. Apparently, the Arezaka Consortium used special means to perform a secondary transformation on Zankai, turning him into this inhuman and ghostly appearance. As for Zansi's current strength, Kaylan estimates that it will be higher than the original 8th level modified person. Kaylan tried to use alpha language to give Zansi the suicide command, but nothing happened. The mutated Zansi didn't even turn his head to look at him. From this point of view, the micro bomb installed in Zanzi's brain had been dismantled by the heretic sect during the 2nd transformation. After all, he had become a radiation monster without self-awareness. This kind of prevention of rebellion, the device has no value of existence. For Kaylan, this will be a tough battle. These 2 riot suppressor shotguns alone would definitely not be able to kill this monster. By the way, what's your transformation level? Kaylan looked at Victoria and asked. I am not, a standard biochemically modified person, can't be classified according to that level, if we calculate the combat power, it's almost the same, 8th level. Victoria replied using her damaged vocal device. That's a troublesome thing. There is a mutated 8th level reformer outside, and your current state is definitely a lot worse than when you were in your heyday. Due to the decline of one thing and another, I'm afraid there is a strength gap between you and it. Not too small. Kaylan muttered, the blast door won't last long, and there are no other exits in the security room. The only window is less than 10 meters from the door. If you jump out, you will definitely be discovered. Kaylan rubbed his forehead irritably and said, "In other words, no matter what, we will inevitably fight it. I'll hold it, to pick up those, rebels, weapons." Victoria said. "It seems that this is the only way." Kaylan leaned against the window and stared at the severely deformed explosion-proof door with all his attention. Bang, another heavy slash, and the crack in the explosion-proof door widened a little more, and it was about to tear the entire door open. It seems that the next knife should be able to break the door. Kaylan thought to himself, but he quickly used a multifunctional knife to remove all the screws that fixed the iron fence. Crack, stab, sure enough, when the heavy naginata fell again, the thick explosion-proof door was torn open like a thin piece of iron. The next second, Zanji, who was nearly 2 meters tall, ran headlong into the security guard room. Bang! Victoria pulled the trigger, and more than a dozen lead bullets immediately hit Zanji's body firmly. Although the armored prosthetic body on his body had been removed, the thick hyperplasia tissue blocked these bullets. The deepest of these projectiles only penetrated a few centimeters deep, and could not damage Zanji's body at all. At the same time, Kaylan had used the butt of his gun to smash open the glass and metal mesh on the window, and climbed directly to the outside of the security room. The security room was about 200 to 300 meters away from the place where they had exchanged fire with the Ranger rebels. If Kaylan wanted to get there, he first had to break through the encirclement formed by the radiation monsters. So many, this was the first thought in Ian's head after he pulled it out. When he and Victoria escaped from the factory just now, they shot and killed nearly 100 radioactive monsters, and now they are surrounded by security guards. There are almost the same number of monsters outside the room. So many radiation monsters. How many people have been killed by the Arezaka Consortium who were used as experimental materials? Kaylan sighed secretly in his heart, but he also knew very well that now is not the time to mourn for these people. There is only destruction. Only by defeating the conspiracy of the Arezaka Consortium and the heretical sect can we avenge these people. From a biological point of view, these radiation monsters are indeed still alive, but as human beings, they are already dead. Instead of living in pain like this, it is better to free them. Kaylan didn't feel any psychological burden from killing these former kindred spirits. Bang! 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 Kaylan continuously pulled the trigger, and several radiation monsters crawling over were immediately repelled by the huge kinetic energy attached to the lead bullets. Taking this opportunity, he directly swallowed a concentrated stimulant tablet under his tongue, and escaped from the encirclement. He rushed out of the gap at full speed. PS6 Samurai Zanji, also from the Yu-Gi-Oh! 6 Samurai deck. The prototype character is the famous Japanese General Yoshitsuji Oko during the Warring States period. P.S. Today is April 20th, the author's 26th birthday. As a birthday gift, can you give me some monthly recommendation tickets? Thank you very much. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi-san. Chapter 218. Oral stimulant tablets had an extremely bitter taste. Kaylan felt as if a piece of industrial salt had melted in his mouth, but as the drug took effect, his sense of taste was quickly blocked. Not only the sense of taste, but also the soreness of the muscles and the pain of damaged internal organs were all blurred. He could only feel a force continuously bursting out from every corner of his body. Isn't this pill too exciting? Kaylan couldn't help but think. This oral stimulant was given to him by Victoria. Compared with the military stimulants he had injected, this concentrated pill contained the dosage is probably more than 10 times that of a unit injection. Reloading, pulling the bolt and loading the gun, turning to aim, and pulling the trigger, the whole process took less than a second. After repelling a radiation monster that was about to catch up with him with one shot, Kaylan speeded up his pace again. And in the blink of an eye he had already run more than 100 meters. Kaylan understood that this medicine was completely overdrawing his physical energy, squeezing out the last bit of strength from every muscle and bone. When the effect of the medicine wore off, what awaited him would be torture that would be worse than death, but he had no choice. At least he could get a chance to survive by doing this. If he died here, he wouldn't even have a chance to be tortured. Sometimes, being able to feel pain is also a kind of happiness, which at least means that you are still alive. In less than 20 seconds, Kaylan had already reached the place where they had fought with the rebel skirmishers. The corpses of the rebels fell in twos and threes on the street, with weapons and ammunition falling beside them. Kaylan leaned over and took a copy, and a modified Type 01 assault rifle fell into his hands, probably because of the fact that they perform tasks outside all year round. The weapons used by these mercenaries are extremely rough in shape and have metal receivers. The outside is wrapped with a thick non-woven fabric, and both ends are tied tightly with copper wire to prevent dust from blowing in. The handguard under the muzzle is welded with a sharpened steel pipe, and the sharp front end is stained with rust. It was still stained with dried blood. The two magazines were simply and crudely tied together with tape, and they were put up and down. After one magazine was empty, it was pulled out and turned to the other end to insert it to continue firing, although reloading will be a little more troublesome, but it can shorten the reloading time to about half a second. The whole gun has quite the style of the Exiles. Of course, it is not ruled out that it may be a trophy captured from the Exiles. Kaylan looted several more of these 2-in-1 quick-change magazines from the corpse, plus several fragmentation grenades, then turned around and ran back. In Victoria's current state of prosthetic body, with just a rioter shotgun, she will definitely not be able to defeat Zanji, who has turned into a radiation monster. If Kaylan arrives late, he might just see her torn apart. Corpse. Although that woman can be annoying sometimes, at least now, she and Kaylan are teammates on the same side. Before they even got close to the security room, the radiation monsters surrounded them again. They kept making inhuman roars and swarmed up like wild beasts. It was hard for Kaylan to believe that these monsters were once his own kind. He adjusted the shooting mode to full automatic, then pulled the trigger. 222 Tuesday. The muzzle of the Type 01 assault rifle spit out nearly half a meter of flame, and a powerful recoil came from the butt of the gun, causing Ian's shoulders to ache, even during the stimulant's effect. He still involuntarily took half a step back to relieve this arrogant force. Kaylan finally understood why there was a red exclamation mark next to the fully automatic gear of the speed switch of this gun. Although the appearance of this gun looks similar to the Type 01, its internal structure has been completely transformed, and the muzzle brake that should have been at the muzzle has also been removed and replaced with a flash hider to increase concealment. Although the gun retains the fully automatic mode, in the hands of the rebels, this thing is actually used as a semi-automatic weapon. Because it is impossible for normal people to withstand the violent recoil in its fully automatic mode. But for Kaylan, he needs exactly such a weapon now. The bullet fired from the muzzle directly penetrated the torso of the radiation monster that was hit, and then continued to penetrate the other two monsters in the same straight line behind. One of the three radiation monsters was exploded. Of the heads, one had its spine broken and lost the ability to move. Although the last one could still move, it was obviously seriously injured. 2222. Another short burst of fire knocked down the two monsters blocking the front. Kaylan felt as if his shoulder blades had been cracked. However, under the influence of stimulants, his sense of pain had become very dull. His only choice was what can be felt is that the entire right arm has become very stiff, and the palm and fingers are completely numb. The worst case scenario is that I'll be completely wiped out, and then I'll change to a cybernetic body. With this thought in mind, Kaylan rushed into the security room in a few steps, just in time to see the shotgun in Victoria's hand being chopped into two pieces. Split into two pieces. Get away! Kaylan shouted, and pulled the trigger on Zanzi's defenseless back. He held the butt of the gun under his arm, stretched his left hand forward, held the handguard tightly, and suppressed the muzzle of the gun that was jumping up wildly. The right index finger pressed the trigger all the way, and didn't release it until the entire magazine was empty. Facts have proved that his warning just now was completely unnecessary. The bullets that could easily penetrate several radiation monsters were not able to penetrate Zanji's body. Although its back was a bloody mess at the moment, the injuries were only on the surface of the body. It's just proliferative tissue, and the bullet didn't even touch its original skin. It's proliferative tissue, his bullets can't penetrate it, Victoria warned aloud. At this time, Zanji had turned around, holding the heavy naginata high in his hand and pointing towards the door. Kaylan was smashed down. With a loud thud, the naginata left a mark several centimeters deep on the metal ground. Kaylan, who could barely dodge, had his heart beating wildly. If the knife had been hit, his entire body would probably have been hit. The person was immediately cut into two pieces. Even if he was immediately thrown into the medical warehouse, it would not help. Kaylan almost subconsciously switched to the action of reloading, and swiped another shot at Zanji's chest. However, the proliferative tissue on the front of this monster's chest was thicker than the back. It took so many rounds of bullets and it was still okay. Likewise, it suddenly took a step forward, raised its foot and kicked Kaylan in the head. P.S. Thank you for your monthly votes and recommendation votes. I have seen everyone's blessings and I am very happy. Thank you. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chenmi-san. Chapter 219. Kaylan could only dodge to one side again. With the help of stimulants, his reaction speed was much faster than before. Otherwise, he would have died under the heavy naginata just now. Give it to me, Victoria shouted to Kaylan. Although there were only two short words, Kaylan still understood what she meant and threw the modified rifle in her hand towards her. Victoria suddenly jumped up, grabbed the gun in mid-air, and then landed lightly on Zanji's back. At the same time, her feet directly transformed into a pair of sharp hooks, which were as fast as anchors. On top of that proliferative tissue. Immediately afterwards, Victoria pushed the muzzle of the modified rifle into the wound made by Kaylan just now, pushed it to the deepest point and pulled the trigger. The dull sound of bullets tearing flesh and blood came from Zanji's body, and the next second, the barrel of the modified rifle exploded directly. Zanji turned his body crazily, trying to throw Victoria off his back, but Victoria seemed to be nailed to his back, and the hooks did not loosen at all. And this one. Catch it. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Kaylan also threw the frag grenade he had collected to Victoria. Without saying a word, the latter pulled the ring of the grenade and stuffed it into the muzzle of Zanji's back. Then he released the hook and jumped far away with the help of the swinging force. Boom! With the muffled sound of the grenade exploding, Zanji's movements froze, and a large amount of plasma mixed with pus from mutated tissue overflowed from its facial features. Its tall body twitched, and then hit it hard. On the ground. Finally solved. Kaylan just breathed a sigh of relief. Before he could finish the sentence, he fell straight down. He only felt that every muscle in his body seemed to be cramping. His face was completely distorted by indescribable pain. Ah. Intermittent moans came from Ian's throat. He wanted to turn his head and look at Victoria, but found that his neck was completely unresponsive. Normal, medicine, side effects. Victoria's unique mechanical sound sounded above Ian's head. He felt as if he was being dragged several meters away, and then something stuck in his head. He hit his arm, his vision went dark, and he passed out completely. When Kaylan woke up again, he found that he and Victoria had appeared at the outer edge of the residential area. The towering Arazaka Tower was less than a kilometer away from where they were. Have I been unconscious for a long time? Kaylan glanced at Victoria, who was standing next to her. She was holding a gun and maintaining a vigilant posture. Only 10 minutes, I injected you with relief medicine. Victoria whispered. Relieving potion, Kaylan was stunned, but soon he realized what the potion did. At this moment, the severe pain caused by the side effects of stimulants on his body had disappeared, replaced by there is an obvious feeling of fatigue, but fortunately, he is still conscious and thinking clearly. This is, a residential area. You have one last chance to choose to go back. Victoria glanced at him and said. We've come this far, there's no reason to go back. Kaylan smiled and took the pistol handed over by the other party. Check, the outer residence first. Victoria nodded to Kaylan and walked towards the residential area first. This is a single apartment. The unit floor area is ARC standard 24 square meters, which is one level higher than Ian's dwelling. In the outer area of the Arezaka family's residential area, there are nearly 30 single-person apartments like this. If each building has 10 to 12 rooms, there are about 300 rooms. From the information card at the door, we can learn that the occupant of this single apartment is named Arezaka Ryuya, a collateral member of the Arezaka family, and his position within the Arezaka Foundation is as a person responsible for purchasing metal raw materials. Salesperson, this position is not even considered a mid-level employee. No wonder the residence assigned to him is so simple. The door to the apartment was not locked, or even closed tightly. Through the crack in the door, Kaylan could vaguely glimpse the toilet and wash basin installed on one side of the entrance. Victoria pushed the door open and walked in. She saw a corpse kneeling on the tatami, with its drooping head pressed against the kotetsu table in front of her. A black pistol fell to the side, there was a bullet hole on the temple on one side of the corpse. The blood stains on the side had solidified, but the eyeball on the side near the bullet hole bulged out due to the sudden increase in intracranial pressure, and almost came out of its socket. On the kotetsu table, there was also a brief suicide note. My package has been delivered, containing an injection and a sword. I know what you mean. But, I really don't want to become such a monster. I am also afraid of the pain of seppuku. Fortunately, the pistol I bought last month for self-defense can be used this time. The package mentioned in the suicide note and the sword Kaylan were found in the corner of the room, but the injection was missing. From this point of view, after Arezaka Ryuya committed suicide, someone should have entered his residence. The injection was taken away, the door that was left open was naturally the work of a latecomer. As for the function of the injection, Arezaka Ryuya also wrote it very clearly in his suicide note, after using it, he will turn into a monster, but Victoria believes that the monster here should not refer to the radiation monster they just encountered, but the seed of erosion. If a human wants to mutate into a radiation monster, an injection alone is definitely not enough, but if it is a seed of erosion, as long as there is the right inducement, the transformation from the incubation period to the mature stage can be completed in a matter of minutes at the fastest. P.S. Regarding Japanese short swords, a little knowledge to prevent misleading, anti-collision wakaizashi, not ribs, there was a typo before, it has been corrected, ribs is a wrong way of writing, and the difference from wakaizashi is the same as shotgun, the same as a shotgun, is a short knife used for close combat, not for suicide as for another kind of combat short knife, kaitong, it is a thick-ridged knife used for breaking armor. The weapon used for seppuku is the third. There are 3 types of swords, which are called the sword. Generally, if conditions permit, a samurai who commits seppuku will choose the sword instead of the wakaizashi. Although the wakaizashi is already very short compared to tachi and katana, there are still many. The length of 10 centimeters is very inconvenient to use to commit suicide. In many anti-Japanese films and TV dramas, the Japanese officers who committed seppuku directly penetrated their bodies with sabers. In fact, this was not considered seppuku at all. Samurai seppuku required an incision in the stomach, and would also arrange for the wrong person to complete the seppuku. Then cut off the head of the seppuku to reduce the pain as much as possible. Here I recommend a movie, The Last Samurai. Although this movie is suspected of glorifying Bushido, it is still very good in terms of the relevant details. Yes, interested readers can take a look. PPS, I would like to make a suggestion to all the senior management of TEPCO. It is useless to bow, it is better to commit seppuku. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter, author, and Chenmi-san. Chapter 220. The patriarch in the suicide note should refer to the head of the Arezaka family. It seems that the heretical sect has completely controlled the entire Arezaka consortium and used the resources at its disposal to transform most of the residents in the residential area into seeds of erosion. Container, but the question is, what are they doing cultivating so many seeds of erosion? Kaylan thought for a while and listed the clues he had now one by one. When you were at the blockade earlier, you used the pheromones of the flesh-eating worms to attract only a few erosion seeds. This means that the vast majority of the seed of corrosion containers in District 9 should be under the control of the heretical section. At first, I thought they were planning to concentrate the seed of corrosion to attack the outer blockade, but obviously, they did not do that. If the peripheral blockade is attacked by a large number of erosion seeds, the garrison will definitely release flares. Now the power lines of the entire East 9th District have been cut off, and the lighting can only rely on the light refracted from several surrounding districts. In such a dim environment, the flares will become extremely eye-catching, but, except for the one launched by Major Ashkarni, Kaylan, and the others have never seen a flare explode above the East 9th District. Pass. This means that the blockades in all directions have not been attacked by more than 30 people or by super powerful individuals like Arezaka Yui and Zanji. It's not like it's for defense. Kaylan played with a bullet casing he picked up casually in his hand. The enemies we encountered along the way, except for the 3 boss-level units of Black Skeleton, Arezaka Yui, and Zanji. Other than that, there are just some trash fish like mercenaries and radiation monsters. If all these trash fish are replaced by erosion seeds, let alone the residential area, the investigation team may not even be able to get out of Kabukiko 1st Street. So this guess can basically be ruled out. Victoria lowered her head without saying a word, seeming to be thinking about something. Hey, I've said so much, can't you tell me what you think? Kaylan glanced at her with some dissatisfaction and threw the bullet casing in his hand. Bang! Victoria reached out and grabbed the thrown bullet case. With a slight squeeze of her fingers, the bullet case turned into a thin piece of metal. Hiss, your analysis is right, hiss, I agree with your point of view. It's really rare for you to say this. Kaylan sighed, but I do have a bold guess. I'll put it here first. This is just a guess, without any evidence. You can, hiss, tell me. First of all, it can be determined that the rituals of the heretical sect are related to the holy object mentioned by Arezaka Yui, and this holy object was brought out of Leviathan's body by Manstein. In other words, this thing actually originally belonged to Leviathans. If you are bolder, you can completely assume that it was precisely because Manstein took out this thing that Leviathan woke up early before the resurrection progress was completed. Kaylan took a breath and continued, the resurrection of Leviathan requires a lot of flesh and blood. In order to achieve this goal, those red flesh worms devoured all the human corpses in each base. If this element is translated to if we take the incident in East 9th District and replace the keyword human flesh with the seed of erosion. He lowered his voice slightly and said, the holy object from Leviathan, plus a large amount of flesh and blood as nutrients from the seeds of erosion, these two things added together, you can think about it with your toes. I understand the seriousness of the problem. Do you think, hiss, the heretical section hiss, is creating prehistoric species? Yes, that's what I think, even if the things they create are not as good as the ancient behemoths like Leviathan, at least they are many times stronger than rotten fish and shrimps like Arezaka Yui. Moreover, this is not in the wilderness, but inside the Ark. If we carry out a prehistoric battle inside the Ark, even if we can win, our losses will probably be incalculable. If, that's really the case, then, it must be stopped. I'm afraid it will be difficult for just the two of us. It's really strange, why haven't reinforcements arrived at this time? Since there was no signal flare and reinforcements had not arrived, Kaylan really couldn't figure out what was going on outside. We, have to go there. Victoria raised her head and looked at Arezaka Tower not far away and said. Why don't you wait first? Oddly enough, since entering the industrial park, Kaylan and Victoria have never heard those weird cries or screams, and they have always been in the back of Ian's mind. The voices calling him everywhere suddenly fell silent. Could it be another trap? Just when Kaylan was thinking this, a circle of dazzling bright light suddenly emitted from the top of Arezaka Tower. Then, the entire East 9th District was restored to power, and large swaths of lights were illuminated from inside to outside. It lights up one by one. The power has been restored. Kaylan quickly took out his mobile phone, but the signal grid still showed not in the service area. Victoria inserted a metal finger into the wired network interface in Arezaka Ryoya's residence. After 2 seconds, she shook her head and said, the wired network, is still disconnected. It seems that the reserve energy in East 9 District has been activated, but the connection with the outside world has still not been restored, Kaylan said, but I don't know what their intention is. If we really want to determine the purpose of the heretical sect, I'm afraid we can only know it by entering Arezaka Tower, as Victoria said. At this moment, the long-lost sobs sounded in Ian's ears again, but this time, Kaylan clearly heard the words mixed with the sobs. Help me, save me. This was a weak female voice, which did not sound very old. However, although she spoke human language, for some reason, Kaylan always felt that the creature making this voice did not seem to be human. That kind of vague and hoarse voice is not like what human vocal organs can produce. Even Victoria's electronically synthesized voice sounds more normal than this voice. Did you hear that cry? Kaylan turned around and asked. Heard, wails, screams, wailing, Victoria pointed at Arezaka Tower. That's where the sound came from. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 221. 10 minutes later. Kaylan and Victoria had passed through the residential area and arrived directly below Arezaka Tower. During this process, they did not encounter any enemies, neither the rebels of the Rangers Company nor the radiation monsters that were generated in batches appeared. The entire residential area seemed to be completely undefended. Did you smell it? Kaylan said in a deep voice, it's such a strong, putrid smell. My olfactory system is damaged. Victoria shook her head, but according to the thermal, camera display, the entire Arezaka Tower, inner wall, seems to be covered with a layer, substances with high caloric content. She paused and continued, this tower, is like, some kind of creature. You mean this Arezaka Tower is alive? Kaylan glanced at Victoria in surprise, and then focused his attention on the tall tower in front of him. However, looking from the outside, he couldn't find it at all. Something unusual happened. Help me, save me. The weird voice sounded in Ian's ears again, getting clearer every time. Kaylan was basically sure that the source of the voice was on the top floor of Arezaka Tower, where the strong voice had just come out. That place of light. Get ready. Victoria gestured to Kaylan, then stepped forward and kicked open the door of Arezaka Tower. Kaylan only glanced into the open door and knew where the putrid smell came from. The entire interior of Arezaka Tower is covered with a layer of carrion-like biological tissue. You can vaguely see blood vessel-like structures underneath these tissues. They are squirming and constantly pumping some unknown liquid toward the top of the tower. This tower is really alive. Kaylan and Victoria still carried some explosives with them, but it was absolutely impossible to blow up the entire Arezaka Tower with this amount of explosives. Even trying to blow a big hole in the alloy structure of the tower was a bit reluctant. If this tower were built on the wasteland, Victoria would only have to place a laser beacon and wait for the fleet's missiles, but this tower is located inside the Ark, and, directly below the East 9th District, it was one of the 4 main power furnaces of the Ark. If the missile did not affect the main power furnace, it would be easy to say. If the main power furnace detonated, the death toll would probably have to be counted in the unit of 10,000. These tissues, are they part of that creature? Kaylan took off the plastic holster from his waist, and then tentatively threw it in. However, when the plastic holster landed on the carrion, nothing happened. This thing looks very similar to a bloodthirsty carpet. I think it's better not to step on it rashly. Before Kaylan could finish speaking, Victoria had already raised her hand and fired at the carrion on the ground. The bullets hit the carrion. Several large holes were opened on it, and smelly pus and blood immediately gushed out, but nothing happened. "There is no time to waste," Victoria said, already striding into the front hall on the first floor of Arezaka Tower. The decoration of the front hall on the first floor of Arezaka Tower can be said to be extremely luxurious. The floor is all made of water-polished marble that is as moist as white jade. 4 red lacquered wooden pillars as thick as 3 people can hug each other stand on both sides of the entrance. There are Japanese-style decorative carvings, and the hollow space inside the pillars is designed as a display cabinet, which contains samurai swords with gorgeous scabbards, but now, these priceless decorations have been covered with carrion, with only a small part of it was exposed. In the corner of the front hall, there was a female corpse sitting on her knees in a suit and skirt. More than half of the body was wrapped in carrion, but what made Kaylan feel strange was that the carrion did not affect the body. No damage was caused, and even the clothes worn by the corpse were still intact. These things don't seem to be interested in human flesh and blood. This discovery made Kaylan relieved at first, but then made him nervous, combined with the previous speculation. Could it be that the nourishment they are pursuing is it a seed of erosion cultivated using human flesh as a container? Kaylan tried to cut off a piece of rotten flesh with a knife, but in less than 3 seconds, the rotten flesh on the tip of the knife melted, the pus and blood dripped to the ground, and was quickly absorbed by these tissues. Carrion tissue cannot survive without the body, and will dissolve quickly. Kaylan silently wrote it down in his mind, then took out a few pieces of test paper from his small bag and dipped a little pus and blood on the tip of the knife. The pH value tends to be neutral, non-corrosive, no biological toxicity has been found, and the Geiger counter did not sound, indicating that it is not radioactive. He suddenly discovered that these carrion, besides looking disgusting in addition to having an unpleasant smell, it is actually harmless to the human body. Of course, this conclusion is limited to the few basic tests he is currently conducting. As for whether it is really completely harmless, more sophisticated analytical instruments are needed. The elevator, still works. Victoria's voice came from the other end of the lobby. Kaylan turned around and saw that she had used violent means to open the elevator door, and a wire was connected from her. The prosthesis extended out, passed through the touch screen used to control the elevator, and was connected to the circuit board behind it. "Are we just going to go up there?" Kaylan said hesitantly. Even so, he quickly walked into the elevator car. "Otherwise, you want to, take the stairs. Then let's take the elevator." Kaylan looked around. At least there aren't those disgusting things in the car. The elevator rose very quickly. In less than 20 seconds, the elevator had reached the 29th floor. There were still 4 floors away from the 33rd floor on the top floor, and the last 4 floors could not be reached by this elevator. If you want to go up, you have to either take the core elevator located in the main office of the consortium's board of directors, or you can only take the stairs. I suddenly realized that we seem to have missed a very important clue. Kaylan walked out of the elevator and said to Victoria while alerting the surroundings. "What's the matter, At the izakaya, the brain tissue of all the victims was removed, but we still haven't figured out where the removed brain tissue went. Kaylan originally thought that Zachariah might have been an accident, but then he thought about it. He put the pistol to his temple and shot himself. His brain tissue had been completely destroyed. In other words, what the heretical sect needs is to be intact. The lossless human brain. Leviathan's holy relic plus the flesh and blood of the seed of corrosion plus a large amount of human brain tissue. What happened on the top floor of Arezaka Tower? Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 222. Be careful, there is someone on this floor. Victoria raised her gun and pointed it at the corridor outside. Is there someone? Are you sure it's someone? Kaylan held the handle of the gun tightly with his right hand and put the gun body on his arm. In his left hand, he picked up an offensive grenade with the safety pin removed, ready to use it at any time. Throw it out. Not sure. Victoria shook her head. According to the vibration, there are 3 targets, approaching. There are only 3 enemies. What Kaylan was most worried about was being blocked by a large number of monsters at the exit of the elevator. The space here was small, and there was basically no room for dodge and maneuver, and the control system of the elevator they got on had already been completely destroyed during Victoria's violent invasion. The entire car was stuck on the 29th floor. If you wanted to get down, you could only blow up the bottom of the car and jump directly from the elevator shaft. Very close, Victoria said, already putting her finger on the trigger. She didn't need to say anything. Kaylan had already heard obvious footsteps at this time, and he was walking quickly towards the elevator. But just when the footsteps reached the corner and were about to appear in their shooting range, they suddenly stopped, and then there was a soft click sound. Get back, Kaylan instantly realized what the soft sound meant. He grabbed Victoria's shoulders and pulled her back forcefully. At the same time, he threw the grenade in his hand towards the corner of the corridor. Get out! Boom! 2 explosions sounded almost at the same time. The louder one was the offensive grenade thrown by Kaylan, while the lighter one was the projectile thrown by the opponent. It was a silver metal tube, about the thickness of a hand, 10 centimeters long. It was a small thermite grenade. This thing is not common in the army, because when fire attacks need to be used, the command of the field troops officials often directly choose to call bombers to drop napalm. When air support cannot be obtained, there are also incendiary grenades with a larger attack range. In comparison, the thermite grenade's attack radius of only a few meters is too small. If you want to set up a wall of fire to block the herd, you will have to throw in at least hundreds or thousands of thermite grenades. Only a few rounds of incendiary grenades are enough. But this thing is widely praised in the hunter circle. Hunters rarely need to face large-scale indigenous biomes, and basically do not need large-scale anti-personnel weapons. The smaller the power of the weapon, the more control and safety it means. It is also more reliable, not to mention that in the hands of hunters, thermite grenades are generally not used as anti-personnel weapons. Destroying traps, melting metal, lighting, you can even use this thing to make a fire to keep warm in an emergency. Kaylan and the others also brought a lot of thermite grenades in their equipment boxes. If they were not lost in the crash, if so, they wouldn't be in such a state of confusion when facing the Cleftjaw swarm. With a swish sound, a flame zone 5 to 6 meters long and more than half a meter wide appeared where Victoria had just been standing. Under the high temperature generated by the thermite reaction, even the alloy ground melted. As for the surrounding rotten meat, it was instantly carbonized, emitting a unique smell of burned protein. However, this scene made Kaylan feel relieved. Since he can use thermite grenade, it means that the other party is not a monster, at least not yet. Here we go again. 2 more thermite grenades bounced off the wall and landed in front of Kaylan and Victoria. The sudden rise of the curtain of fire forced them to retreat again. They want to compress our activity space. We have to rush out, otherwise, there will be no place to hide soon. Kaylan quickly understood the other party's intention and lowered his voice and said to Victoria. SSS, will throw you out, SSSS, get ready. Victoria nodded, and the mechanical arm was already tightly clamping Ian's waist. Throw it out? Wait! Before Kaylan could finish his words, he was thrown into the air by Victoria and flew directly over the flame zone. At this time, he finally saw the true face of the other party. It was three people. A samurai wearing Japanese-style armor. No, those armors are not worn on the body, but directly embedded in the body. That is not armor, but a special cyborg prosthetic body. These were three high-level biochemical transformation people. Kaylan guessed the identities of these three people in an instant. There are only three people left among the 6 warriors. Before Ian's brain could make this judgment, his finger had already pulled the trigger. Thud, tug, tug. He was still holding the Type 01 assault rifle that had been modified by the explosion. The huge recoil immediately pushed him out and fell heavily to the ground. However, this sweep of fire still succeeded in forcing the three people back. Compared with monsters, humans at least still maintain the nature of seeking advantages and avoiding disadvantages. They will use bunkers and find ways to avoid enemy attacks, instead relying on instinct. The driven monster may have rushed forward with bullets in hand at this time. Victoria quickly jumped over. She rolled on the ground to eliminate the impact when she landed, and then quickly pointed the gun at the corner where the 3-6 samurai were, and fired a series of suppressive shots. They are the remaining 3 of the 6 warriors, Yulang, Ertsong, and women, 2 8th level and 1 7th level transformer. Kaylan got up from the ground in a somewhat embarrassed manner and said to Victoria quickly. Is it to transform people, or? It's not that kind of monster. Before Victoria could finish her words, Kaylan already knew what she wanted to ask. At least there are no obvious signs of mutation on the outside. Got it. Victoria took out a magazine with a special mark from her backpack and replaced it. This magazine contained a type of ammunition called acid-etched bullets. This stuff is generally used to deal with those who have the cuticle and exoskeleton of the hard-shelled indigenous creatures, which are difficult for ordinary armor-piercing bullets to penetrate, are only a matter of time before acid-etching bullets are encountered. The same goes for the cyborg armor of the 6 samurai warriors. Kaylan also replaced the explosive Type 01 in his hand with a full magazine. Although he has other weapons that are easier to control, when facing the 6 warriors, I am afraid this is the only one with terrifying recoil weapons can cause effective damage. The person who just used the thermite grenade should be the level 7 fire door. According to the description in the data, this person is good at using firearms, throwing objects, and explosives. Be careful not to be tricked by him, Kaylan reminded behind Victoria. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 223. Although Yulang and Ertsong are both stronger 8th level transformers, their attack methods are mainly close combat. When keeping a distance, the threat is lower than that of the 7th level women. Throwing objects and firearms are not the only things that need to be guarded against. According to the description in the data, women is also particularly good at setting up booby traps. If he accidentally steps on something, it may be impossible to even leave a whole body intact. It's not like Kaylan has never thought about detonating the mini-bomb installed in the opponent's brain, but now Victoria is next to him. If he uses the password rashly, it will be difficult to hide it from her eyes. Moreover, under the gun after Zoe died, Kaylan could not guarantee whether the Arasaka Consortium would change the password to detonate the bomb. But just as he was thinking this, 2 extremely fast figures rushed out from behind the corner, and rushed in front of Victoria almost in the blink of an eye. Rushing in front was a man holding 2 weapons, one long and one short. The samurai wielding a thermal blade slashed across Victoria's waist and abdomen like scissors. Behind him, the swordsman holding an astonishingly long noda-key in both hands jumped up high, drawing the blade in front of him. A dazzling arc of light appeared, heading straight for Victoria's throat. The two of them seemed to have cooperated countless times and had a tacit understanding, which almost blocked all the space for Victoria to fight back. She had no choice but to retreat. However, her prosthetic body suffered a lot of damage in the radiation environment just now. Her retreating movement was a little slower than half a beat, and her entire right arm was cut off by the noda-key sword. The larger of the two thermal energy blades. The long one even made an extremely exaggerated opening in her abdomen. Fortunately, the high temperature attached to the thermal blade had already sintered the wound the moment it was cut into the abdomen. This prevented the internal organs and intestines from rolling out directly from the abdomen. However, despite this, such an injury is not suitable for humans. But still fatal. Death. You all die. Kaylan couldn't care less at this time and shouted angrily at the two of them in the language of Alpha civilization. The Arezaka Consortium did not change the password. In the next second, the two high-level cyborgs fell to the ground. Their death conditions were almost exactly the same as those of Gunzo. One of them was even hit by his own weapon when he fell. Penetrates the body. Hey! Are you still alive? Hello. After confirming the death of the 6 warriors, Kaylan immediately ran to Victoria and turned her body over, but when Kaylan saw the wound on her abdomen at this moment, the action of reaching for the first aid kit stopped. The thermal energy blade's destructive ability to biological tissue was far beyond Ian's expectation. Victoria's abdominal cavity was now in a mess. If Kaylan performed debridement and bandaging at this moment, instead, it would cause her to die from massive bleeding. Hiss, still alive, hiss. Victoria raised her head with some difficulty, trying to check her injuries. Don't look at it, the entire abdominal cavity has been burned. I guess we need to reconstruct the organs, or simply replace the torso with a cybernetic body. Of course, the premise is that you can survive until you are rescued. Kaylan, I took out the first aid kit anyway, and after digging around for a while, I realized that except for the painkiller injection, there was nothing in it that could help Victoria now. The wound must be kept in a sterile environment, to eliminate the possibility of infection. Kaylan raised his head, looked around, and wherever he looked, there were only traces of thermite burns and a fishy stench covering the entire space. Rotten flesh, which made him couldn't help but curse, sterile, sterile as. I can't pour the entire bottle of medical alcohol into your stomach to disinfect it, can I? Hiss, my right side, hiss, calf, in the secret groove, hiss, there is a medicine. You mean this? Following Victoria's guidance, Kaylan quickly found the potion she was talking about. Yes, SSS, direct, SSSS, intramuscular injection. Kaylan looked at the small bottle used to contain the medicine. There was no label on it, but since Victoria asked him to inject it directly, it must be something she prepared to save his life. Without saying a word, Kaylan pulled off the protective sheath and inserted the needle into the still intact flesh next to her wound. Less than 10 seconds after the potion was injected, Victoria actually stood up on her own, which made Kaylan widen her eyes in surprise. What kind of panacea is this? It can actually bring the dead back to life. This, hiss, is not medicine, hiss, it is a blocker, that can, hiss, including the heart and lungs, hiss, most of my life support organs, are, part of the prosthetic body, hiss. You mean you used drugs to block the connection between the prosthetic body and the living body? The brain uses the artificial respiratory system to supply oxygen? But, without the support of the living body, you rely solely on the prosthetic organs to survive. You can't hold on for long, Kaylan said in shock. Although this method can minimize the impact of the injury in a short period of time, Doing so is tantamount to completely abandoning all parts of the organism except the brain. Doing so is equivalent to carrying out a level 10 or above biochemical transformation. Surgery, the survival rate is almost zero. But at least, I can still have, a few hours of activity time. This is my task, I must, complete. Victoria put the severed arm on the ground and she picked up the gun, but when her eyes swept over the bodies of the 6 warriors, she was slightly startled. You killed them. How did you do? A virus program can issue a forged command to detonate the microbomb in their brains. I used this method to kill Gunzo before. I thought the Arezaka Consortium would fix this vulnerability, but after they discovered this at the time of the problem, there were probably no programmers alive within the Arezaka Consortium, Kaylan said. In fact, the detonation program of this bomb is not something that ordinary programmers can write at all. Just how to identify the language of Alpha civilization is not something that human computer programs can do. Kaylan estimates that this bomb, the bomb's detonating device, was most likely dug out from the remains of the Alpha people. Virus, program, Victoria looked at Kaylan with some disbelief. The 6 warriors had many bombs in their brains. The Security Bureau must know this, and they would definitely arrange for the top hackers to crack this detonation program. As for the result, there is no need to think about it. If the program that can recognize Alpha language can be cracked by hackers, then Alpha text can be compiled into computer language long ago. P.S. The one who uses 2 thermal energy blades, one long and one short, is the Roku Samurai Nizang. The prototype is the swordsman Miyamoto Musashi, who is good at using the 2-sword style. This person is so famous that I won't explain it here. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chenmi-san. Chapter 224. Let's talk about this later. Kaylan picked up Ertsong's 2 thermal energy war blades. Although the high temperature state cannot be turned on in K-Ian's hands, the 2 knives themselves are made of nano alloy. It can be regarded as a rare weapon. Later, Kaylan found Women's body behind the corner. As expected, there were 4 booby traps and a remote-controlled bomb installed just around the corner. Even his body had a trigger mine hidden on it. If someone rashly turned over Women's body, this trigger mine would detonate all the inventory carried by Women, creating a huge explosion. You are still going up now. Kaylan dismantled the trigger mine, collected all the explosives carried by Women, and then turned to Victoria and asked. In her current state, if she immediately returns to the blockade for treatment, she still has a high chance of surviving, but if she decides to climb to the top of the tower, it means that she only has these last few days left in her life. Hours. SSS, said, SSSS, this is my mission, Victoria said in a tone that left no room for doubt. Kaylan didn't say anything more. He just glanced at her silently and handed over the 2 grenades. At this time, the weird sound appeared again, but this time it was clearer than every time before. In the background noise, like the tide lapping on the rocks, countless different voices were wailing. Among them there were men and women, as well as the elderly and children. They seemed to be suffering unspeakable torture. Among these cries, Kaylan also heard a hint of urging. They were telling him in this indescribable way, there is not much time left. I heard that voice again. Kaylan said. To Victoria nodded, but, I can only hear, sound like, a tidal surge. Those, hissing, whining sounds, have disappeared. Victoria nodded. The content of this voice is different for everyone. This has been confirmed before. Kaylan estimates that this should be inseparable from the abilities he inherited from the stone tablet. I heard the cries of men, women, the elderly and children. Kaylan said, suddenly feeling a chill down his spine. I don't know why, I suddenly thought of the brains that were taken away from the victims. I always feel, these cries come from those victims. Their bodies have died, but their consciousness has not completely died, and they are suffering huge pain. hiss, you, look, hiss, around. At Victoria's reminder, Kaylan focused on the surrounding environment. He suddenly discovered that unknowingly, the entire Arezaka tower seemed to be aging at an accelerated rate. In this space, the flow of time seems to be accelerated, the carrion covering the floor, walls, and ceiling is slowly shrinking, and the surface of the metal corridor guardrail is gradually covered with an oxide film. Even mottled rust began to appear, and an ornamental potted plant at the end of the corridor completed the process of withering, and returning to dust in just 10 seconds. Corpses. Even the corpses. Kaylan lowered his head and found that the parts of the living bodies of the 3-6 warriors had now turned into skeletons, and the flesh and blood seemed to be dissolved out of thin air into the air and disappeared without a trace. What is the principle of this? Unspeakable fear and horror spread in Ian's heart. He has never heard of anything that can change the flow of time, unless the Ark is now in a wormhole. This situation is possible, but the Ark is now parked on the equator of Alpha Star, with no sign of starting. It's impossible that the entire Alpha Star was swallowed by the wormhole. This is even more impossible. There's something wrong. Kaylan, who calmed down a little, quickly noticed the anomaly. Why is the time in the surrounding environment accelerated, but we are not affected in any way? If this time acceleration takes effect on both of them, Victoria's body will definitely be the first to fail, among other things. Even based on the normal time flow rate, she only has a few hours to live. It seems, only, hiss, to the top of the tower, hiss, can, hiss, get, an explanation. The shock in Victoria's heart was no less than that of Kaylan, but compared with this astonishing, compared to the vision, she had more important things to do. That was her mission, and she would not hesitate to sacrifice her life for it, a mission that must be completed. Walk. Kaylan also knew that Victoria didn't have much life left, and the thing at the top of the tower had less and less time left for them. The internal structural drawings of Arezaka Tower had been obtained when Victoria hacked into the elevator control system, and they quickly found the stairs to the top based on the drawings. The stairs are also covered by those carrion-like biological tissues, but these biological tissues seem to be gradually dying at this moment. They begin to become shriveled and hard, like mummy skin exposed by the sun, and those hidden under the carrion, the blood vessels, no longer squirm. Judging from the previous behavior of these organizations transporting materials to the top of the tower, their mission should be considered completed at this time. This means that the great ceremony. We have really entered the final stage. What is the purpose of the Arezaka Foundation and what are the rituals of the heretical section? We will soon get the answer. Quickly rushing up the last staircase, Kaylan opened the door to the top of the tower with one shot. At the top of Arezaka Tower, there was originally a Japanese-style dojo, but now, what Kaylan sees is only a purgatory made of flesh and blood. It was difficult for Kaylan to find any adjectives to describe the scene in front of him. Under the huge dome of flesh and blood, there hung an Iron Maiden made of an unknown alloy, and countless fleshy hoses extended from all directions. Drilled through the round holes on the Iron Maiden that were originally supposed to be used to install spikes, and connected with the thing inside. Many tubes have fallen off from it, but the remaining ones that are still plugged in are still transporting matter into the interior of the Iron Maiden. A sense of oppression that is almost the same as that of the prehistoric species is continuously emanating from the cruel torture instruments of this old era. P.S. Iron Maiden, an ancient torture device, is shaped like a large vertical coffin, either iron or wood, with many long nails fixed inside. When the coffin is closed, these long nails will pierce the inside the body of the victim. Is a very cruel form of torture. The specific details are too gory to describe. For more information and physical pictures, please ask readers to Baidu by themselves.